Hello, everyone. I'm doing this recording of The Road to Kibana. This was a session that I did at Reconnect, and I wanted to put it out on our YouTube channel. So I'm using the same slides because I thought it was a great session. I did this session with Cameron McClurg. My name is Gary Dranikowski, and I'm a director with SpearMC. At Reconnect, we actually had 7 sessions, so there was a lot of great content provided by SpearMC, a lot of things on emerging technologies, as well as some great HCM sessions. The focus today, though, really is on Kibana and the Elasticsearch indexes. So what I'm going to go over today is some basic high-level reporting in PeopleSoft, talk a little bit about Kibana and how Kibana has evolved with PeopleSoft, then jump into some of the delivered content that Oracle provides that is used with Kibana, and then talk about a custom solution that I did to meet some data needs that we had. And then finally, I'll wrap up just with a few things that you will need to do as a customer to really take advantage of Kibana. And I can talk about some questions that came up during my session. So traditional reporting tools in PeopleSoft, there are PS Query and SQR. These have been around since PeopleSoft started. And ironically, PS Query is the foundational data element that search definitions are built upon in PeopleSoft Search framework. And those search definitions are what source the data for Kibana. Next, there are Envision and BI Publisher. And these are for activities like period close or regulatory reporting, or you may use BI Publisher to do some highly formatted type of things. So it's all integrated within PeopleSoft. So honestly, all these reporting tools that I've highlighted are part of the PeopleSoft framework and not something you have to get outside of the tool like OBIE or Tableau or something like that. Next is the more analytical embedded analytical tools, Pivot Grids and Kibana. So both of these tools provide more of a data, visualized data versus just numbers and what you might find on some of the other reports. So very typically a little more interactive as well. Dig into that a little bit further. There are some similarities between Kibana and Pivot Grids, and that's that they're both used in dashboards and related tiles directly in PeopleSoft. They're included with PeopleTools, and native security rules apply. So any security that's set up on your data gets passed through to Kibana, as well as Pivot Grids. Where they get different is the data, real-time data in Pivot Grids, that those hit directly off of the transactional database, whereas in Kibana, you're hitting off of the Elasticsearch indexes. So your data is as fresh as those indexes are refreshed. The advanced visualizations in Kibana, they're really they look better. It's more of a modern looking tool, and we'll see that as we go through that. Kibana definitely used for large data sets and speed. So you can just access the data much quicker because you are hitting indexes versus transactional tables with a bunch of joins. So the data's kind of already been set up for querying once it's in the index. And then the other one with Kibana that's really good is doing trends across time. So the way that Kibana, the search indexes are built, and then that Kibana picks it up, it really allows for nice visualizations to show where you were at a particular point in time. This was a nice little grid that we put together just to show the various types of reporting tools and then when to use each one. And as I mentioned before, large data sets, Kibana definitely is a yes there, as well as SQR, but Pivot Grids, not necessarily. And those of you that have experience with Pivot Grids, a lot of people complain about the performance of Pivot Grids, and a lot of times it is tied to the data. built for speed, large data sets, kind of similar concepts, but we did list them separately. The visualizations, Kibana by far is the best advanced visualizations. Real-time data, all of them are real-time except for Kibana, but if you develop a strategy for when you need the data in Kibana, I think you can get to near real-time, but really your data use cases will define that, how real-time you actually need that. So why is everyone talking about Kibana? Well, right here, as you can see, these visualizations are really much more user-friendly than what you find with the other tools, right? You've got the pie chart, then you have a metric with just really a number. You can do the gauges, and all of these, when they're on the dashboard, they're interactive. So if you hover over a particular area, it will highlight maybe some additional features, or if you drill down on a dashboard, it will actually re-render the entire dashboard based on that drill down, which then is obviously a filter. So nice features. Next is performance, and like I said, we do hit the search definitions, the indexes, versus hitting the transactional tables. And so once those definitions are built, so there is a quick hit, or it may not be quick, but when you do build your search definitions, obviously that data had to get pulled from the database at that point in time. But once it's built and you're actually looking at something in Kibana, you are hitting the index instead of the transactional table. Training across time, I talked about that earlier. Then these are included in PeopleTools. So when you install or upgrade to PeopleTools 857, 858, that's when Kibana was introduced into PeopleSoft. So not something you have to pay for or license separately, where if you were using Oracle BI, Oracle Analytics Cloud, you'd have to figure out the licensing side of it, as well as how do you actually get data in there, so you're data modeling. And we're still doing a little bit of quasi-data modeling by having to create search definitions in queries, but it's all within the PeopleSoft umbrella. We're not going outside of that and using some advanced ETL tool or metadata framework behind it. And I'm speaking more from an OBIA perspective, but they have the repository or the RPD, so you don't have to build all of that. You're doing that in PeopleSoft, and you can do a little bit of that in Kibana, but for the most part, it's all within the PeopleSoft PeopleTools umbrella. And then near real-time data. So you are able to get fairly close to real-time, depending on what your data needs are. That could be 1 day old, or even a few hours, or maybe on demand in particular cases. So opportunities to meet the needs of your customer, but no need to stress the system with data refreshes and things like that if when the data that you need actually doesn't need to be at real time, true real time. The Elastic company. So this is the company that actually owns the Kibana product. They are an open-based software company that's based out of the Netherlands. And you may have heard of the Elastic Stack or the ELK Stack, and that refers to these products that from the Elastic company: Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So Elasticsearch, hopefully everybody's heard of that. That's the underlying search framework that PeopleSoft uses for search within PeopleSoft. Logstash, probably less familiar with that, at least from a PeopleSoft perspective, but that is the tool where you would pull information out of log files or chat messages. It's similar to an ETL tool. And really for what we do within PeopleSoft, from an application data reporting perspective, we're not using Logstash because we are already just creating the search indexes. And then Kibana is the visualization tool that sits on top of those. Realistically, we always say the ELK stack, but the reason I point that out is it is more like the Lex stack, because you would normally go Logstash, which would extract data out of some data source, move it into Elasticsearch, which would then be how you store the data, and then in Kibana, you would read that data and visually provide it to the end users. Prior to PeopleTools 855, Secure Enterprise Search was the search engine used in PeopleSoft. With PeopleTools 855, Elasticsearch was introduced. By 856, SES was replaced 100% with Elasticsearch. When 857 came around, Kibana, which provided visualizations on top of Elasticsearch, was introduced to PeopleSoft. Now, Kibana at that point was not used on application data. It was only used on system data for system administrators, where they could get performance information on the servers and some backend. It was used, I would say, very minimally, right? So not a widespread use case for the general user, but some of the admins really liked the tool, especially if they were familiar with the functionality of Elasticsearch and Logstash prior to their or outside of, I should say, not prior to, but outside of their PeopleSoft roles. So in 858, they enhanced really the entire usage of the Elastic Company products. They now were using Logstash to pull some information out of all of the servers and putting that into some search definitions, then delivered a dashboard for health centers. So that basically enhanced what they had in 857 for system administrators, and this pretty much replaced the old PeopleSoft Performance Monitor. What happened now was you could use Kibana on top of application Elasticsearch indexes, and that included applying security rules. So that started in 858. Nothing was delivered from an application data perspective, but as PeopleSoft releases PUM images, they continue to add additional content. And when I say additional content, I'm referring to visualizations in Kibana, dashboards in Kibana, modifications to existing search definitions, or brand new search definitions. And those search definitions, those are the foundations that you are building your Kibana reports and visualization / analytics on top of. So the power really now is in these PUMs, and these delivered dashboards and visualizations, they're usable on their own, or they can be saved, modified, enhanced so that users can, and I would say, I'll point that out real quick. It was one of the questions that came up during the session, so I'll just cover it now. But typically, if you're going to modify the delivered dashboards, I would rename those, and also the underlying content, because when the new PUM images come in, you don't want to overwrite things that you have. But the content that's coming in, great starting point. And there's also some of the things that they provide are like in Kibana itself, you'll be able to look at how they've done some examples and then model maybe some of your custom development off of that. And that just helps with training, sort of reusing code, right? So now I want to jump into the demo of Kibana. And what I'm going to do here is, and it's not just of Kibana, it's the underlying stack that we need to really make these Kibana visualizations work. The first thing is the delivered search indexes. And I'll walk through those, and then I'll really hone in on the grant search index. Then talk a little bit about why we had to create this custom solution to build our grants dashboard, and then some of the challenges that we had it, and why, the route that we had to go to get to our solution, and then finally show you what we did in Kibana and the final product. But I'm going to start with the final product right now. So this is what we're working towards, and it's a project summary dashboard. This is all built off of custom indexes that I created. Actually, we will create, or at least I'll show you what I created during this demo. And this is for one particular project, you can see how many activities are tied to that project, how many days are remaining, and then budget information along with more details at the bottom. And you may be looking at that negative 541. That is correct. It's a data set, the project that we have. But what happened here, this project actually ended on April 13th, 2019. So 541 days from when I actually recorded this. All right, I recorded this demo here just so that I can talk through it without having to worry about clicking through all the slides. So I may have to pause it every now and then, but I'm going to get started. So we're going to view delivered search definitions in PeopleSoft Search Framework. So we're navigating here to the search framework, and when we pull these up, we're just going to look at all the search definitions. And there are 77 search definitions that are listed here. And it's probably 72 to 75 of these are the delivered ones, and then I have a few that I created in here. But what I'm pointing to here, these ones were created specifically for Kibana, as you can see right in the name, description, Kibana. We have to click through it because this search definition has already been deployed, so we can't make any modifications. Quickly here, this is the last modified date, time, and URL link. Those are two things that are required if you want to use a query in search definition. The connected query, this is the source of our search definition, and these are all of the available columns. So when you check one of these boxes, that will enable that field to be available in Kibana for reporting. So this particular delivered one has these tree nodes, so you can report on various tree nodes. And then as we go back up to the top here, you can see that there was some posted total amounts. So we get some dollar amounts as well as ledgers. Now this one is a search specific query, or definition, I should say, search definition. This one was built specifically for search and not necessarily for reporting like what I had just previously shown. So if you look in here, there isn't really a bunch of information about the transactions that go against this system. So there's very limited metrics if you're using this from a reporting perspective. And this is the only delivered search definition for grants. So what do I do at this point? Can I modify this? And what would it take to modify this in order to include some of that transactional information? For starters, I'm going to have to figure out what this was built upon, and it was this connected query. So we'll open that, and then we can look at the underlying query itself. So once I click on that, let's take a look in here and see. So these, once again, are all the fields that we saw on the previous, in the search definition that highlight what is available. And some of these were checked, and those are the ones that would have been available in Kibana. We'll look at the expression. So all we really have here is a little change on a begin. It's about it. It's probably just pulling out the month or whatever. But now here, these are I mean, everybody should know the query side of this, but right, these are all the records that are available as well as the fields within each. So what I would do at this point, I'm trying to see if there's anything related to the transactions that I could bring in to this query, but there really isn't in this table. So I'm going to have to look at another table, and as we look down through here, let's click maybe on the contract header. No, this is really just header information. Once again, it's not transaction. So by looking at the table names, we know there's no transactions here, but we're going to have to then modify this query so that we can get the details that we want. So to do that, we're actually going to create a new query. And I worked with Jessica Mann, who's our director in our grants practice, and she helped me to identify the fields and different tables that will get exactly what we want. I worked with her really on the what she was looking for from a reporting perspective. But what she did is we found that we had these posted total amounts, and we could bucket them by ledger, right? So we create each one of these, and that was actually done through the expressions within query. I'm sure a lot of you have built similar queries. So at that point, we're going to run this and validate that, yes, we have the data that we want in the format that we want. And here we go. We have 4 columns. So we've got our budget, pre-encumbrance, encumbrance, and then our expenses. So now we have a source that we can build this query search definition off of. So we're going to create this new search definition. And there you can see the source query name. We'll go look at the attributes. So at this point, I would have to select which fields I want to put in. So at the bottom, those were the 4 that we created. And when we check this, we get a message. This is one that we can't necessarily just click through. This is a message that's saying we can't use those expressions as part of our definition. And I tried so many different ways to get around this, and it just didn't work. So what did I do? Well, I remembered that in pivot grids, I've had to do this where you go out and create a view or that has exactly the columns that you want, so that when you create or use that in a query, it already exists, and some of that extra processing that's getting hung up with the search definition doesn't need to happen. So it's exactly what we did. And if I go into the table here, or into, yeah, we'll look at the fields and then the query itself, you will see down there, we have the budget amount, the pre-encumbered, the encumbered, and the actuals. So those are here. We're not using expressions to create those, and they are existing there as well. And you can see that they are physical columns. We're going to run this again to validate the data, and then we can see right here, yep, we have all 4, and they are populated. And I validated, I mean, we're going fast here, but it was the same. So now we're going to go back into search framework, but this time I'm just going to create a new custom search definition. And I added the search definition, the URL link, the drilling URL, and the date time. And now, if you notice, these are already checked because we custom built the query, we're using all the columns. And I check those 4. So no errors, obviously, if they're checked, it worked. And we can now deploy that. So the next step you really need to do would be to deploy this object, and then we will schedule the search index. So at this point, we have a shell. Once you schedule the search index, that's how you populate the values in the index and make them available for either the searching tool or, in our case, for Kibana. So it ran to success there. Now we're entering Kibana. I've already created the index pattern, and that's what we're looking at here. All of the columns are now available, and there's the actual amount, and all of these are available in Kibana. So anytime we want to report off of any of these, we just select it, and as you can see, they're all here. I did create 4 additional scripted fields, which allow you to do aggregations in Kibana. So a simple way, I mean, there's some rules on when you should and shouldn't use these. And for the work that I've done, I've kept them pretty simple, but I think if you're using really large data sets with the scripted fields, they can cause some problems. But in this case, I just created a simple subtraction of, took our budgeted amount and subtracted out the encumbrance, the encumbered, and the actual. That gives us our remaining spend, budget remaining actually. So now let's go to Kibana Discover and look at the data itself. So I'll just pick the first one, which gives you an expanded view of that row in an easier to read format. So you have on the left there each column, and then on the right's the value for this row. So there's our scripted column there, negative 175 days for days remaining. All of the other data points are listed here. Okay, so we've validated, we have data in Kibana. So at this point, we're free to build some visualizations in dashboards. So what I'm going to show now are is the dashboard that was built. I'm not going to go in and show how we built all of these in this presentation, just due to time. but I want to talk a little bit about what we did here. So this is our dashboard prompt or dashboard filter. And then we have an activity count, which is just one activity was tied to this project. We have the negative 541 days. And like I said earlier, this project ended on April 19th, 2019. So that's why that's looks so odd. The budget remaining, we actually only used 18% of the budget, and this budget was $3 billion. So there was 2.8 billion or 2.8 billion left in the budget. And this right here, we've got a stack bar, which is showing our three expense columns, or not expense, our spend columns, right? Our expenses, our encumbrance and pre-encumbrance, and then the bottom line is the budget. So, you know, you would want to see those lines going up higher, the top, the stacked bar. But the bottom just really is the details of this. Really for this presentation, I added that so that you can tie everything out. But some people like that view, so you may or may not choose to include those details as well. That sort of brings me to the end of the Kibana demo part of this. So I will jump back into the slides. All right, so how do we make Kibana a reality at your company? As we talked about earlier, you need to upgrade to PeopleTools 858. That is your starting point for application data. I mean, technically 857, but what I showed there, you would not get unless you're on PeopleTools 858. Second, familiarize yourself with Elasticsearch indexes and then the actual searches themselves, right? So this is a Kibana presentation. A lot of what I showed here was in PeopleSoft with the Elasticsearches. And that's key because not everything that you want to use in Kibana is going to be available out of the box. So from an out of the box perspective, you have a lot of search definitions that are built specifically for search, not for reporting. With the PUM images, Oracle continues to release additional content that may be specific for reporting, but it may not still meet your needs. So understanding the inner workings of the search indexes is very important. Next, leverage the delivered content. Like I said, it's a great starting point, or even the scripted fields that I talked about earlier. Once you bring in some of the PUM images and the content that Oracle has built, look at some of those scripted fields that they built and understand how they did that so that you could build similar types of content without having to know the painless language. And that is actually, painless is a scripting language that is used for the Kibana scripted fields. So I didn't know the language, but I can look at what they did and kind of decipher the code and then, you know, reuse it and modify it to use some of the fields or ideas that, you know, they used, whether it was a calculation or maybe they were just renaming something. Or one of the cases I showed was days remaining and how they did that, where they took the days remaining, and then you see they actually divide it by 100 because it's in milliseconds, and then 100 again, then divide it by 60 for seconds, 60 again for minutes, and then 24 for days, and that then converts the final number into a whole number. So something I searched around a little bit, and then I was like, oh wait, maybe they do it, and I literally went out and looked at how they did it and then just changed the fields based on the ones that I wanted to use. And lastly, partner with an expert. So you want to work with somebody who really understands how to use Kibana, understand search definitions, search indexes. It's a journey, so there are trainings that you're going to want to take. SpearMC, we actually offer training. We've done 2 training classes, and we do a lot of different webinars on various topics. Some of it may be on the very basic. How do you import data into Kibana, or how do you build some simple visualizations, to things that are a little bit more advanced, or the true end-to-end implementation, which would go from kind of starting with a query, then building the definition, similar to what we showed there, all the way to that dashboard. And then what other bells and whistles can you apply, and some of the gotchas. Let's see. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the few of the questions that came up during the session. So one of the things that came up were drill down capabilities in Kibana. And yes, you can do some drilling from Kibana back into PeopleSoft, or, well, technically, you will be embedding these Kibana dashboards and related content directly in PeopleSoft. So you're not really drilling from Kibana, you're just going from, you're not in Kibana at that point in time, you're actually in PeopleSoft. But yes, you can still go from there to PeopleSoft. Not all of it is fully, I don't know how much of it is customizable, and how much, if you can do, if you have one search definition, you define a drilling URL when you build that search definition, actually when you build a query. And whenever, I don't know how many parameters can be modified in that, or if you need to build multiple search definitions. I haven't done a ton with the drill down capabilities. I've been focused a lot more on the visualizations and those pieces, and that's something that I'm working on. Secondly is Kibana and OBIE. Someone asked, well, why would you use Kibana versus OBIE? And we already have OBIE. Well, that's going to be really a use case, right? So if you are using Kibana, you are staying within PeopleSoft. You have a framework that's already there. You don't have to really add to the data model, whereas, or you don't have to necessarily ETL the data out, although some may argue that building the index is a similar process to the ETL, but it's not as extensive. So I hate to say that, but there is some sort of movement, because you are using the search definitions instead of the search indexes, instead of the actual database tables. And the other one was the data refreshes. I touched on that earlier, which is, your use case is going to define those data refreshes. So once again, this presentation was given at the Quest Reconnect conference, and I appreciate everything they did. It was a great conference. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, once again, I'm Gary Drenikoski. My email address is there, and I gave this presentation with Cameron McClurg, so I still want to make sure I recognize him as well. But I appreciate your time and would love to talk to you soon. There's definitely some great opportunities with Kibana, and I feel like every presentation I go to, Oracle is always pushing Kibana and how wonderful it is. So I think the footprint of Kibana within PeopleSoft is only going to grow, and the earlier that you can jump on board and embrace this, just the better off you'll be, right? And it's a great product, great visualizations, and I think the user experience is great, right? You're within PeopleSoft. You're not going out to OBIE or anywhere else. But I'm excited, and I hope to talk to you soon. Have a great day.